On these spying allegations, we are joined in Washington, D.C., James Lewis, the Senior Vice President and Director of the Strategic Technology Program with the Center for Strategic and International Studies. In Berlin, via Skype, Matteo Ragavoglia, a research associate at the Center for International Studies with the Department of Politics and International Relations, University of Oxford. In Beijing, last but not least, Cui Hongjian, Director of the European Studies Department at the China Institute of International Studies. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. James, what happened?
What happened is someone's trying to torpedo the summit. That's why they made this leak. It's old news. It's from 2014. So we have to ask, what are the political motives? And I don't know. Usually this is something the Russians would do, but it's an effort to torpedo the summit by leaking this kind of information.
Okay.
A political move, we'll see.
We'll see. Interesting. But one of the most important thing is whether somebody played with the timing or not, whether it happened or not. That's probably the most important thing. Matteo, your take.
Yes, but in a way, I would argue this is no news. This is news for the general public, but not for people in the business. This is something that has always been happening. Allies do spy on each other, and there's always an element of mistrust between intelligence agencies. It is just a matter of degrees. Western intelligence agencies mistrust each other to a limited extent on specific issues, and distrust other intelligence agencies much more and across the board. There's nothing new, so I do agree that what is interesting is not what has been going on, because it goes on all the time, but rather the timing of why and when these allegations came up.
I understand the intention to brush off the importance of this news, but it's really interesting as to these kind of news coming out into the public. We saw that earlier with some of the interesting things going on in Europe regarding some independent journalists inside the countries. But recently, this is one of the biggest one. So Matteo, you could argue that all countries spy on one another, but to such a level, to the president, the Chancellor of Germany, and also to such an extent, and particularly not about the Danish directly on Germany, but rather helping the U.S. to spying on Germany. All these are very interesting twists and turns. One can't brush it off, just like that. Matteo.
I'm not brushing them all, but Europeans face three problems at the same time. First of all, they have supremely inferior intelligence capabilities compared to the Americans. Secondly, the United States government, rightly so in my view, applies what is a divided et impera approach, dealing with national governments on a bilateral basis, which gives the United States much more leverage. And Europeans have both diverging interests and perceptions in terms of security threats. So they are playing from a position of weakness, and they have an interest to build a strong bilateral relationship with the United States, and the United States does that extremely well.
So, Mr. Cui, it seems that what Matteo suggests is, well, the Europeans are vulnerable vis-a-vis the U.S. capabilities. So just let it be. What do you make of this recent incident?
I think this incident make me, could help to, call back the Prism Gate. I mean, several years ago. But of course, this time a very different thing is the role of Denmark played as the member of the European Union and also the member of the NATO. So I think this time, yes, to some degree, it's I think the continuing happening for these relations between U.S. and its European allies. But I think now this time we can find out the reactions from European countries. But I think now the key question, just like from President Macron, yes, it happened in the past, but how about the practice now? Especially, yes, I agree with the gentleman mentioned that a kind of political move in the background of the summit forthcoming between U.S. and the EU. But now the question is, how could the European side to be part of this kind of supremacy of, on the American leader, especially once the Biden administration showed a lot of the posture to repair and reshape the transatlantic relations.
Interesting. Matteo, I want to come back to you on that.
I have to say, I'm not, I'm not particularly surprised by any of these, other than the timing, which I think is the most interesting issue, because the Americans have been.
I'm not asking you whether you are
Europe.
surprised or not. I'm asking you maybe to respond to Mr. Cui's question, because you already said you are not surprised, and you don't have to repeat yourself, sir, if I could. Could you respond to the other guests' points, which is, it's very interesting, the French president already made his remarks, and also the German chancellor also made her attitude known as well. So what does that say about the Europe's capability as a whole vis-a-vis its shaping its relationship with the United States?
Not much, because this is for the benefit of public opinion. Heads of states, prime ministers, national governments have to rightly say that this is unacceptable and this is what has to be said to the public. And then we'll go back to business as usual within a matter of a few days. So in that respect, that is for public consumption. Within the intelligence community, this is a non-issue.
But the issue is, it is not just within the intelligence community this time, and this case, it is much beyond. It is going to the national politics and also the relations across the Atlantic. James, please come in about how the U.S. is likely to repair, or is there a necessity to repair in this regard?
There's 3 points that we should bear in mind when it comes to repairing the transatlantic relationship. The first is this activity ended years ago because it wasn't that useful. I mean, seeing what people are having for breakfast provides no intelligence value. Second, there's a deep network of cooperation between the United States and its European allies. So Denmark is not the only country that has cooperative relationships. Germany, for example, and France have cooperative intelligence relations with the U.S. And the revelations from Mr. Snowden did some damage.
Against a third European country?
You know, they cooperate on all the intelligence matters. The ones that are of most concern to them are terrorism, of course, proliferation, always a problem, and most interestingly, because I've talked to a number of European officials from different countries, the biggest problem they see is Russia. And when you look at the poisonings in the UK, the bombings in Czechoslovakia, the recent incident in Belarus involving
but James,
aircraft.
It is no secret that the Europeans are working with the Americans in the intelligence area toward Russia. But what I'm asking is that whether the Europeans are working, for example, the France and Germany are working with the United States to spy on a third European country, just as what Denmark did toward Germany and France?
You know, we're just not going to be able to get into that. I mean, there's a network of intelligence relationships. The primary targets are Russia,
that
China.
They did, right? Or we can assume that they did.
We can assume that countries do what they need to do. I think in many cases, the French and the Germans have spied on other European countries, not necessarily in cooperation with the U.S., but for their own national interests. And of course, the Germans recently exposed this in their Bundestag hearing. So it's a fairly common practice. The big concern they have, number one concern, is Russia and its increasingly erratic behavior.
We understand that there is a very clear message coming from both sides across the Atlantic about Russia, and also increasingly it is also about China to a certain extent. But that is not the issue today. The issue is more about cross-Atlantic relationship, and whether that is in real nature has been repaired after 4 years of the Trump administration, which we knew has been making some very big drama across the Atlantic. So on that point, I want to come back to you, Mr. Cui, observing as a third party. Of course, you're not either on the European side or on the US side, but rather observing as a third party. What do you make of the reality, particularly with this incident once again shining in the spotlight?
I think another very important thing regarding to this incident is, as we know, it's a little bit different from Prism Gate. Is at that time the people criticized the Bush administration, but this time, if you look at the timing, I mean, from it's right for this Obama administration. So indeed it points to Biden, Mr. Biden himself. So I think it's give a very big question to the honesty of Mr. Biden for especially the popular opinion in Europe. I think the other very interesting issue is, Russia and some other so-called the rivalry will be the target for this kind of intelligence sharing between U.S. and European countries.
Okay.
But now this time, the problem is target is not this Russia or some other, is right Germany, France. So it will give us a very big question for this kind of situation is how lack of this mutual trust between allies. I mean, for U.S. and the European countries, for example.
Got it.
Why there is a kind of situation? Because of United States doesn't trust any, allies, including Germany and France, and which kind of intelligence it want to get. Maybe the attitude or policy of Germany and France towards Russia, towards China, I'm not sure. So I think it gives a very big question is how could we define the concept of allies?
Okay, got it. James, would you like to respond to that question coming from Hong Jian in Beijing?
Yes, it was some good points he made, but I think that the Biden administration knows that it needs to repair the transatlantic relationship. There was immense damage done under the previous administration. Since the U.S. really does not spy on Europeans, there is no mass surveillance in Europe. That would be an easy concession to make to help rebuild trust. There's many issues, but I'd point to the reaction to the comprehensive agreement on investment between the EU and China. When that got to the European Parliament for ratification, there was a revolt, and it's on hold. So the political trends are moving in the right direction when it comes to the U.S. and its European allies. We agree on the same things, and the question now is, can the Biden administration turn that into concrete action that repairs the damage? I think they can.
To me, it's also interesting as a journalist to see whether only creating an enemy, for example, like China, that the U.S. is trying to do with its European allies, will be enough and sufficient to create this allyship that you once had before. Will that be this magic tool to repair everything, all the damages being done, and is still being done at this moment between the allies across the Atlantic? That to me is an interesting thing, not to mention the complicated relations China is having with European countries. They're individually and collectively, and the European Union as well. But these are very complicated matters. We might need another 1 or 2 hours to discuss. But I also want to check your temperature, Matteo, about that, about the allies. Will that having a third enemy be enough for allies to work together?
Having an enemy always helps to bring people together. Now, whether Europeans and Americans are creating an enemy out of China, that is something that you claim. In order for that claim would have to be.
I'm not claiming it. I'm just saying that is the intention coming from Washington. Washington is not making it a secret. In various documents, it's clearly being clarified. In the U.S. Congress, it's being said every day in the documents as well. You can check it on all the transcript. I'm not making a claim here. But whether you believe that or not, you whether believe the U.S. politicians or not, that's your matter. But I would just want to know what is your attitude, Matteo.
I share the analysis of my colleague in Washington. Overall, Europeans and Americans are coming together on a number of issues. The trend is positive for the two sides of the Atlantic in that respect. This has been a hiccup, as there are many between long-term married couples, but the trend is positive. Now, how this will play out with other global players, as you said, it would take many hours to discuss.
Mr. Cui, your final words.
So I think it's give a very big question is once there are European countries and also United States always work together, especially when they are target some other countries. So there is no any necessary for United States to have this situation or this action towards European countries. Otherwise, it's just a show that there is not trust from Washington towards the capitals in Europe.
We're running out of time, gentlemen, but I want to thank the three of you for coming over to our program and discuss and express your opinions from your own perspective. Really appreciate it. James Luis, Matteo Garavoglia, and Cui Hongjian, thank you so much for joining us.